that. And it's so important that we pass the big, beautiful bill, because that's going to be, and I really think we're helped a lot by the tariff situation that's going on, which is a good situation, not a bad. It's great. It's going to be legendary. You watch.
President Trump promised to cut America's electricity and energy prices in half. New data, however, shows prices are actually rising more than twice as fast as inflation.
Trump administration has halted work on a huge offshore wind project just off the coast of Connecticut.
This is such a dumb decision. It's going to get fixed.
Frustration and more than a little bewilderment was the mood of the governor as he responded to the Trump administration's decision to halt work on the Revolution wind farm.
The future was meant to be it. Hundreds of thousands of homes in New England will be powered by this massive offshore wind farm, which rises just over the coast of Rhode Island. Revolution Wind was 80% finished. Its turbines are prepared to convert ocean breezes into inexpensive, clean power. Then, with a pen stroke, everything fell apart. Steel towers lie empty like monuments to a shattered promise after the project was canceled just before it could be connected to the grid. Over 500 people lost their jobs in a single night. A single administrative decision's casualties. The same old reliance on fossil fuels and growing expenses unexpectedly confronted families who had hoped for a future of more affordable, reliable, and green energy. What was supposed to be a sign of advancement has turned into a warning sign for New England. Evidence that political unpredictability may quickly wipe out years of investment, especially in an area that is in dire need of sustainable energy. So, here is the question. What does that say about America's chances of winning the next energy race if it can't even complete a wind farm that is almost finished? Remember to use the like button before we begin. A simple like helps spread the word about this film to more people who should see it. Furthermore, Revolution Wind's cancellation was not a singular error. It was the prelude to a far bigger event. Clean energy initiatives are being shelved, postponed, or completely abandoned throughout the United States. Result of unpredictable governmental decisions rather than technological shortcomings. The nation's energy future is being reshaped by a countrywide shortfall that started as a single initiative in New England. Over 10,000 jobs were lost when more than $14 billion worth of investments in renewable energy were either abandoned or placed in indefinite limbo in 2025 alone. $8 billion was lost in the first quarter alone, and an additional $4.5 billion was lost in April. These aren't only spreadsheet figures. They stand for towns left waiting for chances that never materialized, industries that never opened, and building sites that never reopened. The supply chain has been rupturing under pressure, even in cases when projects are still in the paper stage. Critical electrical equipment, including as transformers and circuit breakers, has been in short supply in the U.S. for 54 months running, making it practically difficult for new renewable installations to connect to the grid. Once unimaginable for one of America's most developed areas, New England's utilities now publicly warn of rolling blackouts during periods of high winter demand. It's not just renewables, either. Private corporations, ranging from pipeline companies to nuclear operators, are increasingly characterizing the federal government as an untrustworthy partner that breaks contracts as readily as it signs them. It's unnerving to hear the questions subtly echoing around boardrooms. Who will risk billions to create America's next generation of power if it cannot be trusted to keep its own promises? Are you still here? To ensure that you don't miss the next thing, click the subscribe button. Tariffs were like salt on a wound if the lack of clean electricity was one. Instead of protecting American business, policies have stifled the rise of renewable energy, making projects financially precarious. Renewables are mostly dependent on imports, in contrast to oil and gas, where about 90% of supply is indigenous. Since fewer than half of the solar industry's supply chain is based in the United States, it is very susceptible to abrupt increases in tariffs. It couldn't be worse timed. Washington's tariff wall has slowed wind and solar construction to a crawl while power consumption has risen beyond expectations due to AI data centers and Bitcoin mining. The contradiction is obvious. While shutting itself off from the same sources that may stabilize the system, America is using more electricity than ever before. And energy doesn't stop the harm. The economy has been affected by tariffs, which have increased the cost of equipment and cars by up to 15% and contributed to overall inflation. Home appliances have also been affected. In the first half of 2025 alone, Stanley Black & Decker reported tariff expenses of $800 million. Expenses that are anticipated to be passed straight on to customers. These levies seem more like suffocation than protection to businesses already under stress from shortages. Furthermore, uncertainty itself could pose the greatest threat to America's energy and economic future, as there is no apparent answer in sight. Despite this, the demand for power is only growing as rates put pressure on the infrastructure. There is no stronger contradiction. Washington's own policies are tightening the noose just when America needs clean, dependable electricity the most. The revolution as a lifeline for homes facing growing expenses, wind had previously guaranteed power for only 9.8 cents per kilowatt hour, which was less expensive than the area average. That assurance is no longer there. The cancellation has left New England vulnerable to rising market rates and fluctuating fuel costs rather than stabilizing expenses. A warning has already been issued by the state's own Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. The cost of power may climb by $500 million a year by 2028, which would result in a 5 to 7% increase in utility rates. Even little increases in energy prices might force households already struggling with inflation to make difficult choices about daily spending, savings, and budgets. The situation is equally bad for enterprises. Production prices keep rising annually in the absence of cheaper renewable energy. Manufacturers are forced to take the blow or pass it on, which exacerbates the inflation that policymakers say they are trying to control. As a consequence, there are two problems. Families must pay more at home and at the register, and businesses find it difficult to remain competitive as costs rise. What should have been a tale of accessible, clean energy is instead one of diminishing supplies, growing expenses, and lost chances. A reminder that delay is a kind of loss in energy. In addition to the energy impasse, America's economy is collapsing. Many observers now consider the government's deficits to be unsustainable, notwithstanding its difficulties to provide clean electricity. The government deficit reached $345 billion in August alone, far more than anticipated. Interest payments on the national debt skyrocketed to $1 trillion, the biggest amount in U.S. history, while the gap hit a record-breaking $1.9 trillion at the end of the year. These are more than simply ledger numbers. For every dollar spent on interest, another dollar is not being used for innovation, infrastructure, or renewable energy. Given that projects have already been canceled, the financial crunch raises more serious concerns. Does Washington have the financial capacity to change course even if it wanted to? The country is shown as being in a difficult situation where it needs inexpensive electricity, yet its budget is leaking like a barrel, leaving long-term planning more about survival than aspiration. As Washington struggles with paralysis, Ottawa has been subtly changing the course of events. For Canada, a country long seen as the junior partner in North America's economy, what seems to be a crisis for the United States has turned into an opportunity. The Canadian currency has risen more than 3% versus the US dollar since what Canadian authorities now refer to as Liberation Day, when tariffs and energy uncertainty started to drive investment north, surpassing 16 other major world currencies. It's more than a peculiarity of the market. It shows a greater sense of confidence that Canada, not the US, would now be the better long-term option. Canadian growth is expected to remain stable or perhaps accelerate in 2026 and 2027, which hasn't happened since the mid-1990s. Ottawa is getting ready to reroute up to $38.5 billion in LNG and oil exports that were once headed for the US to markets in Europe and Asia that are in severe need of reliable supplies. Canada emerges as a trustworthy ally ready to fill the void for countries alarmed by America's instability. By removing long-standing internal trade restrictions that for decades delayed the movement of commodities between provinces, Prime Minister Mark Carney has presented the situation domestically as a watershed. According to Carney, Canada's GDP could grow by an extra $200 to $250 billion. To put it another way, Canada isn't just profiting from America's mistakes. In order to seize strategic advantages that might last for a decade, it is re-engineering its own economy. It's an obvious message. Even a smaller neighbor may take advantage of a lapse in one superpower's strategy to re-establish itself on the international scene. The United States and Canada are now on quite divergent trajectories, while being on the same continent. Once seen as the fulcrum of stability, Washington is now more and more perceived as an untrustworthy friend, terminating agreements, imposing trade barriers, and eroding the same confidence that made it the favored ally of the globe. The legitimacy that supported America's decades-long economic supremacy is eroded with each reversal. In contrast, Ottawa has positioned itself as the silent winner. Previously flowing automatically into U.S. enterprises, capital is now shifting north, particularly in innovative manufacturing and renewable energy. Previously seen as a backup alternative, investors now regard Canada as a safer haven with more predictable policies that match long-term promises. It's a dramatic contrast. As Canada meticulously builds its strategic advantages and transforms dependability into its most potent currency, America bears the burden of growing deficits and unpredictability. And while this change is happening quietly, it has significant ramifications. Via the constant covert flow of money, technology, and trust, rather than via loud declarations, the balance of power in North America is starting to shift. Momentum shifts in geopolitics can occur subtly before becoming apparent. And that subtle change seems to be taking place just over the northern border of America today. Although the cancellation of a single wind project may seem to be a local setback, it really represents something far bigger. America's standing in the global energy race is deteriorating. Washington lost the opportunity to reduce prices at a time when demand from digital infrastructure and AI data centers is skyrocketing, in addition to clean power when it canceled Revolution Wind. Global markets are subtly changing their wagers in the meanwhile. Canada is now seen as a growing pillar prepared to underpin trade and investment when the U.S. falters, rather than as the understudy. Every abandoned project and growing debt feeds into the idea that America is lagging behind its neighbor. There is no clearer warning. The United States' position as the global economic leader would gradually deteriorate if it keeps destroying renewable energy projects while squandering billions due to unmanageable debts. And the question remains unanswered. When will America have to admit that it has lost the economic battle it claimed to be leading? This leads us to a fork in the road. One project canceled, one financial deficit, one change in strategy. When combined, they tell a bigger tale about leadership, trust, and the cost of uncertainty. Is Canada already establishing the new rules of the game? Or do you think America can turn this trend around? If this video made you think, please like and subscribe to help fund future videos like this one. Thank you.